Welcome to the House District 39A Candidates Forum, sponsored by the Stillwater Gazette. My name is Marguerite Reinberger. Two candidates will be vying for the state representative in this area, and they are in alphabetical order. Republican endorsed Bob Detmer and DFL endorsed Tim Stender. Thank you both for coming. Jonathan Young, the managing editor of the Stillwater Gazette, will be writing up your responses, and they should appear in this coming Friday, which will be October 10th, for those of you who are watching replays, so you'll know. And then the Stillwater Gazette will be sharing its write-up with its sister newspaper, which is the Forest Lake Times, and I'm not sure when they will publish. Jonathan would like an opportunity to briefly speak now.
I just wanted to thank everyone for coming. Thank you to the candidates for being here. Thank you to Marguerite and Beth, our moderator and organizer. These forums are a little bit of a tradition for the Gazette. We think that keeping voters informed is important, and this is a great opportunity for you to hear directly from the candidates. So thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Okay, this forum is going to only be 45 minutes long as opposed to our usual, what seems like sometimes a marathon, 60 minutes. You'll be invited to give a 1.5 minute opening and a 1.5 minute closing, and up to 2 minutes will be allowed for answers to my questions. Beth Johnson, the forum organizer, will be the timekeeper. She'll hold up cards that say, and this is 20, 45, and stop. Now, when you see the stop, please just finish the sentence that you're in the midst of. The Stillwater Gazette has provided the questions that will be asked for the audience, and thank you all for coming. I'm impressed. Please save your applause until the end. An earlier coin flip determined which candidate will begin the opening, the questions, and closing. And now let's begin our 1.5 minute opening with Tim Stender.
Hello, and thank you all for coming. My name is Tim Stender, and I've decided to stand up for working families and run for the Minnesota House. I'm a father of two, Mitchell, age 8, Sophia, 3. Together with my wife, Sarah, a working nurse, we are raising our family in Forest Lake. I'm a carpenter working in the field every day, and I'm honored to have been elected twice to serve as president of Carpenters Local 68, which services and represents over 2,200 members and their families. Income inequality is the biggest threat to the middle class has ever faced. If this continues, working families won't have a middle class to call home. It's important to protect opportunity and equality for all of our residents. We need safe, efficient learning environments in our schools, and it's not right that college students are shackled to lifetimes of debt just to get an education. I believe in equal pay for equal work, and that no one should work over 40 hours a week and live in poverty in Minnesota. I will fight for tax fairness. Our average citizens are held fiscally accountable to mortgages and taxes every day. Who holds large corporations and wealthy accountable to pay their fair share? When elected, you can trust me to do that job for you. Thank you.
Thank you, and Bob.
And thank you everybody for coming. I'm State Representative Bob Detmer, and thank you for the Stillwater Gazette for putting this forum on. I think people need to know basically who you are when you're running for an office. And my wife is here, 42 years. We have 3 married children, 6 grandchildren. Our twin sons are West Point graduates, class of 2000. They both have had multiple tours in Iraq, 3 tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, and are currently serving in New York and also in Massachusetts. Our daughter also lives in the Lindstrom area, and we have 6 grandkids and 1 on the way. As in terms of an occupation, head wrestling coach at Forest Lake for 34 years, and for School District 831, I retired in 2007 and elected to office in 2006, that election. I'm a retired warrant officer in the United States Army Reserve after 25 years. In terms of my government experience, I've served on several committees. I currently serve in the State Government Finance and the Capital Investment Committee, and which does the bonding in the state, and also the Ways and Means Committee. In terms of philosophy, I think as we get into today's forum, that I will talk about my philosophy for the legislation coming up. Thank you.
I'll have to look up that word SORM, see if there's a negative connotation to it. Okay, we'll begin our questions with Tim. Tim, you remember you have up to 2 minutes to respond.
Okay.
The legislature will need to pass a budget this year. What are your priorities for this?
First, I think, right now, currently, Minnesota's sitting on a surplus. So I do not see shackling middle-class families to any more tax burden right now. I think, can you repeat the question?
Sure. The legislature will need to pass a budget this year. What are your priorities for this?
My priorities for the budget would be education, fiscal accountability, transparency, so that working-class people knew where the money was being spent.
Thank you. Bob?
First of all, there is no surplus right now in the budget. But I've taken a look, working on the Capital Investment Committee, we need to do something about our roads and bridges in Minnesota. So I think our transportation would be a big priority for me. The bill that was passed, the bonding bill that was passed this last session, only $80 million was designated for roads and bridges. And the government, or the legislature, and the Governor Dayton spent $90 million on an office for the Senate. So we actually spent more money on the office for the Senate than on roads and bridges. I think we need to take a look at how we prioritize our spending. We are taxing our homeowners too much in terms of real estate tax. Our small businesses are taxed beyond. I've talked to many businesses in my area, in our district, and they're having a problem, especially when now they have to also look at if they have 50 or more employees in terms of the Obamacare and the health care, that now they have to work with too. So with that, being an educator for 34 years, education is very important to me. It's close to my heart. But just spending more money on education is not the answer either. We have to look at how we prioritize our spending in our local school districts. We also have to look at how the money is spent in our districts. We hire superintendents, we elect school board members, and they have to do their job to balance their budgets within the money that's allocated by the state. So with that, transportation and education are two big areas for me.
Thank you. I'll begin the next question with Bob, and it's long, so.
Okay.
In 2013, the Forest Lake School District tried unsuccessfully to get approval for special deferred maintenance levy authority that would enable the district to tax locally for funds to take care of roof projects, parking lots, and the like. What, if anything, would you do to support the district's need for deferred maintenance funds?
Well, first of all, the school district came to me, and I supported that fund. And I think they came across with a little bit too much for the school district and for the voters. And I think we need to take a look at when they want to pass I think we're talking about the levy. If they want to pass a levy, they need to really get out in the community and speak to the community and exactly what their needs are, not what the wants are, but what the needs are. We need to take care of our infrastructure and our schools, the buildings, and the heating plants, the roofs, the windows, those types of things we need to take care of because we've already invested a lot of money in those facilities. When they came to me and asked me to support that levy, I said, well, one thing you have to do, what we did in '98, when the last big one that we passed in Forest Lake, my wife and I went around in the community, talked to church groups during coffee time, and spoke to them exactly what our needs were in the school district. And the bonding levy passed. We built a new junior high, we added on to the high school, and we also added on to all the elementary schools that did some upgrades there. So I think if the community, the taxpayer really trusts the schools, they'll come out and support the schools. I really believe that, our kids have come through the Forest Lake School District. And I think even though I'm retired from the school district, and a lot of people have had their kids go through the school district, they'll come out and support funding for schools if we can really, really show them how the money's going to be spent, and then bring businesses in when it comes to the planning and how you're going to get it out to the public. Because businesses are the ones that are really hit hard with the taxes. Thank you.
Thank you. Tim?
I supported the school levy. I think we need more money in the education system. I think part of the reason is the state has quit funding education to the proper means. When you put it back on communities, a lot of times conservative areas take away from funding in school districts. We need a state-level education funding program. And Bob, I know you voted on several occasions not to fund education. You have on occasion, but I think we can do better at a state level for making sure that our schools, whether it's Hibbing or Forest Lake or Rochester, have more funding per student. And I know there's been some work done on that, but I think we can do more. As a father of two with children that are going to be going to school instead of done with school, education will be a definite priority if elected.
Okay, and I do allow for rebuttals when I think there's potential.
Right, I
You have a
would.
minute rebuttal.
I would. And, spending 34 years in the classroom, watching the educational process and coaching all those years, I can see where budgets in public education can be streamlined. And as I mentioned before, by just putting a lot more money into education, that's not going to increase the graduation rates. It's not going to increase what goes on in our schools or winning football teams or whatever it is. It really comes down to the teacher in the classroom working with the students and having the district, the superintendent, and the school board prioritize how that money is going to be spent and keep it in the classroom. The only time in the state where I might have voted against anything in the state was if we felt, in fact, Minnesota, 70% of the school district's budget that we have in Forest Lake and around the state is provided by the state. And then we have a small amount that comes from the federal government, because they have mandates, which they don't fund, and then a small amount from the local district. So 70% does
If
come from the
things that you
state.
can't, things that you aren't able to finish, please add to your closing.
Yeah.
Thank you. Tim, I'll begin the next question with you. Do you believe Minnesota's current tax structure is fair? Why or why not? And what would you change, if anything?
No, I don't think it's fair. I think the middle class takes the brunt burden of the tax in Minnesota. I think we need to do more with holding corporations and the wealthy accountable for their share.
Thank you. Bob?
Well, taxes, I think you come to Minnesota, you're guaranteed you're going to be paying your fair tax, regardless if you are a business owner, where you hire people, you put people to work, whether you're a plumber, a carpenter, or whatever. Businesses are the one that put people to work. And I believe that you're right, the middle class or the lower class, or any class you want to talk about, are hit hard with the taxes. In fact, the state just put a higher tax level on the higher income people already. That's the past legislation. I really believe that if we take a look, when we took, in 2010, when we took the majority, we started with a $6 billion tax deficit. And in 2 years, we turned that around with a $1.3 billion surplus without raising taxes. We took a look at the different agencies that we have, whether it's Department of Human Services or Minnesota Department of Transportation or Department of Natural Resources, whatever agency it is, we told them, take a look at your budgets and go to a zero-based funding. Just because you got a 20% increase the biennium before doesn't mean you're going to get a 20% increase this time. And we were able to reduce that deficit. Now, we did to do a shift, education shift, But we paid that back, $1 billion, we paid that back when the funds came in. And then we tried to pay back the other $1 billion that the Democrats shifted from education. And Governor Dayton then vetoed our bill because he didn't want us to get credit for paying it back. That's a fact.
Very good. Going forward, Beth, I'm just going to ask, and he was fine. Yeah, no, I know he was. Will you just say stop out loud so then I'm not worried about looking over? Okay, Bob, next question. What is one issue you feel so strongly about that you'd vote against your party to see it adopted or defeated?
That's a good one. Adopted or defeated. I guess there are times when certain taxes that come up in the legislature where if I feel that it's not going to serve the people of Minnesota, that doesn't happen too many times with the Republican Party, I want to be honest with you. But there are times when a piece of legislation would come up. A good example would be the bonding bill, where there are, this past session, there was a $1 billion bonding bill, or $847 million plus a $200 million spending from the surplus. There was things in that bonding bill that my colleagues on the Republican side wanted in that bonding bill, projects. And in order for the Democrats to pass it, they had to get 8 Republicans to come over and vote with them because they needed a supermajority in the House to pass the bonding bill. So you're looking at about a $1.3 billion bonding bill, and I voted against it, even though there's colleagues of mine that had projects in there that needed them. So I think it really comes down to prioritizing spending. Thank you.
Thank you. Tim?
Can you repeat the question?
Sure. What is one issue you feel so strongly about that you'd vote against your party to see it adopted or defeated?
Tax increases for middle class. You like to talk about a bonding bill, but I think a bonding bill was what we needed this last legislative session to keep people working and to build Minnesota. You like to talk about transportation and you vote against it. You talk about education and you vote against it. When it comes to my party, I think my party's done a pretty good job, and I'd like to be part of the solution, I guess.
Thank you. And Bob, I will give you up to a minute.
You know, I take a look at what goes on in the legislature, these big omnibus bills that comes in all the time, and I wish we didn't have these big omnibus bills, because they just throw a whole bunch of things in this omnibus bill, even though it might not just be transportation. And again, I repeat it that the governor only spent $80 million on transportation, and that was put forward by the Democrat Party. And they spent $90 million on a office complex for the senators. So where is the priorities there? And I feel that, you know, bonding, you are borrowing money, and you're paying interest on it. And as homeowners, when we take a look at how we're going to improve our homes and or buy vehicles and stuff, we have to take a look at our budgets. And if the money isn't there, most of us homeowners won't be doing it. Maybe the state should follow what our homeowners have to go through all the time.
Okay. I'm into insightful discussion. Tim, do you want to add anything? You have up to a minute.
Yeah, thank you. When they put out the bonding bill, essentially the budget, what the GOP did was they stripped the transportation out of it and resubmitted the budget, right?
No, because it was not our bill. We don't have the votes to do that. We can put amendments onto the bill, try to amend it, but
You're right, I misspoke. It was on the budget, not on the bonding.
yeah, and even on the budget that we have this last biennium is not a Republican budget. It's a Democrat budget.
I'm going to, next question with you, Tim, I begin. Do you see a need for pension reform at the state level?
Pension reform at the state level, I have a pension. I think when it comes to pensions, I think the pensions that the state give are good. I've talked to several people at the door about how important their pensions are. You know, I'm a union carpenter, and part of the reason why I am a union carpenter is for a pension. And I think we need to protect the people that work for us at a state level. I think we need to honor obligations that we have to those people. I think we need to stand behind those promises. And I think that we owe something to the people that work for the state of Minnesota. So I think we need to do all we can to fund our pensions. And I think people should have a right to retire with dignity and not be a burden on society. That's what I think.
Thank you, Bob.
And I agree. I voted for your pension retirement. When it came up this year, we looked at the different increases that the pensions were, whether it's TRA, PRA, or Minnesota Retirement Association. I looked at those, and yes, we do need to stand behind that. But if we look in the future, can we afford to continue on the same type of retirement pensions as we are? Maybe we need to take a look, allow people to maybe use some of that money for private investments. But right now, I voted for your pension, making sure that it's there for you when you do retire. I retired in 2007 from teaching with the TRA pension, and we need to continue looking at the accounts. I know the TRA right now is about 80%. Para, I'm not sure where that is at. It's probably 70%. So we need to take a look at how this money is invested, because we know what happened after the big drop in 2008, is that a lot of these pensions went south. And we need to make sure, and the state taxpayers do bail that out. So it's not just money that we put in, that you and I put in. The state taxpayers, those that are working on private companies that don't get these state pensions, they're paying into our pension. So we need to be really aware of what's going on. Thank you.
Thank you. And Bob, I'll begin the next question with you. Do you think that liquor stores should be allowed to stay open on Sunday? Why or why not?
Okay. I guess if you live in Stillwater along the border with Wisconsin, you would probably say, yeah, well, let's keep them open. I've talked to a lot of, there's lobbyists that come into the state all the time. And you can usually tell a good lobbyist if they know both sides of the issue. If a lobbyist comes into my office and says, my way or the highway, well, there's the door. So I like to look at both sides of the issue. And I would say many of the liquor store owners have come to the Capitol and say they would like to have that day off with their employees. And then there's people that say, well, why not just let each county decide how they want to do it, or each city? Well, that's, I tell you one thing, it's going to be brought up again this next session at the Capitol, I guarantee it. And so I think I'm open to that subject, although I think that people can usually go to the store on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and take care of that without having to head over to Wisconsin. By the way, they got a nice big bridge that's being built right now, and I talked to Governor Walker during the groundbreaking ceremony of that bridge, and he did mention something to me that was kind of interesting. We were talking about veterans issues, but he said that one thing Governor Walker is trying to do in Wisconsin is get rid of income tax. Well, I looked at him and I said, well, tell you that bridge is going to be pretty busy going from west to east. And but anyway, yeah, I'm open to that whole issue, and I would like to listen to both sides of the issue because it's going to come up again in the Capitol.
Every 2 years for what seemed like decades, I asked about the bridge to the Stillwater Council. Finally,
Build that bridge.
wow, no need for the question. Tim?
On liquor on Sunday, I think in some aspects it's already open. There's brew pubs in Minnesota that are allowed to sell liquor on Sunday, if I'm not mistaken. I guess I would be for selling liquor on Sunday.
Thank you. Tim, I'll begin the next one with you. Hi. You never know who you'll run into up here, I'm telling you.
Welcome.
Yes. Tim, are state representatives compensated fairly, not enough, or too much?
That's an interesting one. I would say fairly. I would certainly not be looking for any money. That's an interesting question. One of the great topics I recently had at a door. I've been knocking a lot. I've been knocking for 4 months ever since I took the nomination from the DFL and the endorsement. And I've been having good discussions. But I recently knocked on the door and I talked to a gentleman that told me he's been a supporter of Bob Detmers for 4 years, or for 4 terms. He's voted for Bob, and he said this time, he said, "You've got my vote." And I said, "Why is that?" And he goes, "Because something offended me about Bob." He said, "When the legislature ran long and a few representatives decided to step up and take extra pay for not getting their job done, Bob was one of them." So you see, I work in the private sector, and when I don't get my job done, I don't get a pay increase, Bob, I get fired. So I think legislatures are paid well, and I think they need to take the time that they're allotted and get their job done.
Just
Thank
so, yeah, you're welcome. Just so happens you have 2 minutes.
Okay. Well, take a look at what the Democrats did this year, and I'm not going to attack you personally. I think when I met with you when you were mowing your lawn the other day,
Yep.
I said, you know, it's going to be a good campaign, and I'm not going to criticize people personally. But the Democrats passed a bill. It's going to show up on the 2016. It's going to be to amend the Constitution, that a committee, appointed committee, is going to determine the salaries, the pay raises for the legislators. Right now, it has to be done in the legislature, and there hasn't been a pay increase since 1998. And I think that having an outside group coming in, appointed by whom, to determine pay raises, I think is not the way to do it. I think we should stick the way the Constitution says now, that it has to be done in the legislature. And in terms of that, what you accuse me of, during the shutdown, which was shut down by the governor, not the legislature, the Constitution says that the legislature cannot shut down the government. Only the governor can do that. He called us back. But during that time frame, I was working. I was out talking to people in my district. Just because we weren't at the Capitol doesn't mean a legislator does not go out and do the work in your district, which I was doing. So just to counter what was said here. Thank you.
Yeah. Tim, do you want an extra minute?
Thanks.
I'll begin the next question with Bob. As the state continues its economic recovery, what specifically would you do to help businesses succeed?
Well, I think what we need to look at is when businesses leave Minnesota, it's not the fault of the business, whether it's business if they leave Minnesota or go to another country like we've seen. It's not the fault of the business. I mean, people that own a business, let's say if I started a business, I'm in it to make money. I'm in it to hire people. Also, the business also has to pay workman's comp towards people if they're hurt on the job. Also, unemployment insurance, the businesses have to pay that. So we have to take a look at the tax structure. We have our tax structure in Minnesota is not friendly to businesses. When businesses look at a state, when they look at a list of states which are friendly towards businesses, Minnesota is not on that list. And I think we have a great workforce. In fact, I went through the carpentry training area, which I support. We have a great workforce in all the trades. And businesses, why not? I mean, if you take a look at Williston, North Dakota, a lot of Minnesotans are going up to North Dakota because that's where the jobs are. If we bring more businesses into the state, we will have more jobs for people, for the trades, and by just taking a look at the tax structure, we could change the corporate tax. Medtronics, they found a better place to run their business. So I think you can't blame them for that, though, because they have the right to do what's best for their company. And I think we need to really take a look at Minnesota, where we're heading, and I think we can turn things around and bring businesses into Minnesota, not let them leave. Thank you.
Tim?
I don't think we need to turn things around. I think Minnesota's a leader in the nation, and if you look at it, Minnesota is second only to Connecticut for the number of Fortune 500 companies to the per capita population. Minnesota's a great state. I work in a refinery where I see the people coming into Minnesota. I see the people flooding from Ohio and Indiana and Iowa and Florida. The parking lot's a who's who for right-to-work states. People are coming to Minnesota because we do have good jobs. We have unions that are strong. We have people that are working. And you know what that does, Bob? That helps businesses all across this state. It puts paychecks in people's pockets so that on Friday they can go to that cafe and get dinner with their family, so they can take the family to a movie on Saturday, so my son can get new ice skates, so I can afford the hockey camp that he wants in the summer. I think keeping Minnesotans busy and working will grow business, small business, and big business. I think Minnesota is a leader, and I want to see it continue to be a leader. I don't think we need to step back.
Bob, would you like an extra minute?
I think we take a look at what's happening. There's many people in Minnesota that are underemployed. They might have the education, the training, whether it's in the trades or not. They've had this training, but there's no jobs for them. And I think even though we see a little turnaround now with the building that's going on here in Minnesota, I know in Forest Lake there's a lot of new housing that's going on. But that could be a very fragile thing. We need to bring businesses into Minnesota, and most of the jobs that we have are in small businesses. Thank you.
Thank you. Tim, I'll begin the next question with you. Forward thinking, what 3 specific types of legislative proposals would you strongly support?
Strongly support education.
Specific type. I mean, what in education is?
What in education? Increase funding for our students. I would work on transportation for sure. And I would
Specifically what?
specifically on transportation. Transportation. We need to increase and protect our roads and bridges. We need to continue to grow our infrastructure, and we need to continue to make Minnesota more business friendly. We need to talk to corporations. We need to know what they need. We need upgraded infrastructure. We need upgraded data service. We need the things that corporations need to come here. I personally own a property up in East Bethel. I bought it years ago on Highway 65, and I've held that property because it's on a corner with the stoplight. And instead of selling it, I talked to the realtor that was selling the property behind. And they said, business is coming here, but they're waiting. They're waiting for the infrastructure. They need the city water, they need the city sewer, they need the data, they need the things that are capable to do business. I think Minnesota needs to continue to grow and build and be enticing to business. And I think we can do that. I think we have a strong workforce. I think we have people that want to work. And I think if we continue to grow Minnesota and build it, more businesses will come here. We have strong workers, we have good education systems, and I think we can be a leader.
Thank you, Bob.
Excuse me. And I really believe that these are some pieces of legislation I'm going to be pursuing if elected this next session. I think most of you can identify with people, whether you're friends or family or neighbors, that have problems with Lyme disease. I have worked with legislators, and I've also the medical board and the Minnesota Lyme Association, and I put together some legislation for Lyme disease so that doctors can work with their patients on an individual basis without being penalized by the medical board for prescribing antibiotics for more than 28 days. That's the current policy of the medical board. Right now, we have a 5-year moratorium, and that is up this coming next session. So I'll be going forward with that piece of legislation again. Also, veterans-owned small businesses. I have a piece of legislation that Actually, the governor signed this piece of legislation that the veterans-owned small businesses, now if you are a veteran and you have a small business, you can get certified through the Department of Administration. You won't have to go through the federal VA, because we know what's going on with the federal VA. We can certify them right here in the state that you, say if you own a business, you could be a carpenter or whatever it is, you can now be certified here in the state of Minnesota to be certified as a veterans-owned small businesses, and when you go out and get jobs and put bids in, there could be some priority for these veterans, keep them on the payroll. Also, we're one of the only 5 states now that still tax our veterans' retirement pay. I have a bill that's going forward, and I'm going to pursue it this next session. You put in 20 years as a veteran, and now why come back to Minnesota? We have 381,000 veterans that live in Minnesota. Only 4.7% of those are retired veterans. And most of those are veterans that are 65 years and older. The young veterans don't come back to Minnesota. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll begin the next question with Bob. Evaluate the success of the state health care exchange, MNsure. What, if any, changes would you propose to the program?
Well, I think the Affordable, or I should say the Unaffordable Care Act that has come to Minnesota, the Governor Dayton has endorsed it, and right now we have 280,000 Minnesotans who have lost their insurance, now have to go into the exchange and try to find something. The website still doesn't work properly. Number one, if we're stuck with this in the state of Minnesota, we better fix that website so that people can get insurance. Right now, there's only 4 insurance companies that are in the exchange. The one that was carrying 60% of the sales have left, are going to be selling insurance outside the exchange. So it's a disaster. And at the national level, it's even worse. They spent $2 billion on the national website, on the national website. Minnesota, we spent $160 million on our website, and it still doesn't work. Now, I'm not an IT person, but I'm sure there's some people in here that know something about websites that could probably get things going. But it hasn't happened here in Minnesota. $160 million. In fact, prior to the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, 93% of the Minnesota had health insurance. And the 7% that didn't, many more young people that did not want to spend the money on health insurance. Others, all they had to do was go to the county and fill out the paperwork. They would have had health insurance. So there's a small number, really, that did not have health insurance in Minnesota. We were a model for other states, and that's going down the tube. Thank you.
I'm actually going to add 1.5 minutes on, so you can add, to address the second, so you'll get 3.5 minutes. And the question is, what do you propose exactly be done?
Well, first of all, I said that for now, if we are stuck with it, we have to fix the website so people can be served. And I wouldn't give $26,000 bonuses to these people that are supposed to be running this website. And we tried to pass a bill in the House that in order to be on the board, on this MNsure board, that you had to have a background experience in healthcare. Nobody does. They would not allow it. So it's just, it's just mind-boggling that we would allow this to happen here in Minnesota when we have the facilities we have down in Rochester, and people come from all the world to come to Minnesota for treatment. And for 2 years, our daughter, lived in Germany. And the people that she lived with got a hold of me. They knew that I was in the legislature. They told me, don't do what we've done here in Europe. Don't let the government run your health care.
Thank you. And Tim, as you can see, sometimes these questions just demand more time.
Sure.
So do you need me to repeat it? Or? Okay, sure. Evaluate the success of the state healthcare exchange MNsure to date. What, if any, changes would you propose to this program? So you have up to 3.5 minutes to
Okay.
fill it how you want.
We all know that there's been problems with MNsure, but the truth is, healthcare costs were spiraling out of control in an open market. And we have something. We have something that's not perfect, and it needs work. But let's look at what we like about MNsure. 95% of Minnesotans are now have the opportunity to have medical insurance. Kids are able to stay on their parents' medical while they go to college longer. We don't discontinue people for having pre-existing conditions. These are good things. MNsure needs work, but we have something. The GOP keeps going back to no fix. At least the Democrats are working on something, and I think it's heading in the right direction.
And you said MNsure needs work. Specifically, what would you?
Well, Bob hit it. There's problems with the website. Sure. We had, there's been issues with Preferred One stepping back. But even with Preferred One stepping back, it looks like it's gonna only drive up the cost by less than 5%. I can remember as a carpenter where our insurance costs have gone up way more than single digits. And I think it's important that Minnesotans have a right to health care.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to take moderator discretion. We're going down to last question, 1.5 minutes, because we have our closings. Tim, what would you do specifically to help your district at the state level?
My district, personally, I think needs education funding. Forest Lake has been fighting a levy now for over a year. We need to upgrade our education system in Forest Lake. We need to continue to work on education funding. We need to figure out some way to elevate education across the state. But I'm concerned with Forest Lake. It's where my kids are gonna go. We also need to work on infrastructure. We need to continue to grow business in Forest Lake and small business in particular. I think the best way to do that is by keeping people working.
Thank you. Bob?
Well, grant you, small business is really what we need in our area, in the North Metro area. But the only way you're going to do that is create a tax structure that business will want to relocate outside or into Minnesota. Transportation, I think that's a big issue. I think we have to invest more into transportation, and the money that comes out of taxing, the gas tax needs to all go into roads and bridges. I think if people want the light rail, maybe they should wait until we get our roads and bridges squared away. And I think our education, Forest Lake has an outstanding education program, great teachers, and I think we could take a look at the legislature and how we fund the different school districts. I mean, when St. Paul, Minneapolis gets $15, $16, or $17,000 per pupil, and in Forest Lake gets $10,000 per pupil, you can't tell me that you can educate a child better with that amount of money in St. Paul, Minneapolis, and not do it as good in Forest Lake or in the northern suburbs. I think we need to take a look at equity in education. That's the biggest problem. When I first came into the legislature, that was something I really wanted to do, and I'm going to continue working on that.
Thank you. We're going to begin our 1.5 minute closing statements. And Tim, go ahead.
Well, thank you for coming. I think tonight's forum has shown a clear difference between Bob and I. I have an uphill battle, but here's why I think we should retire Bob Detmer. Bob campaigns like a moderate, but he votes hard right. He votes against consumers' rights, programs to curb bullying in schools. Bob can usually be found fighting for the big guy. Bob is not even the right champion for his own groups. He's attacked the bill to give veterans Veterans Day off. Bob was a teacher, yet the teachers have endorsed me. And finally, Bob's voting record shows that he will vote to protect himself. He votes down any wages, he votes down any wages that hike up for he votes down, sorry. I'm a carpenter, not always a speaker. He votes down wage hikes for the rest of us, but twice now he's protected his own wages from citizen oversight. Bob is smart. He likes to run like a moderate, because if people knew the truth on Bob's votes, he'd surely lose this election. We didn't even talk about the votes he's made on climate change or equal rights, but I know Bob is not right for our district. You can do it yourself and explore Bob's voting history on votesmart.org. That's where we've been looking. It's time for a new voice in our communities. My family is in this economy with you. I understand the private sector because I work in it every day, and I will fight for the good of all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim Stender. Bob Detmer?
Well, thank you, Stillwater Gazette, and sponsoring tonight's House 39A Forum, and Margot Reinberger for your serving as a moderator, and for my opponent, Tim Stender, for coming in and participating. If I needed a carpenter, I would hire you. And when I meet people when I'm knocking on doors, when I meet people, there's always one question that a lot of times people ask me when I'm knocking on doors, and I knock on doors too. Why should I vote for you? And I answer by saying, I'm honored to represent and serve the citizens of Minnesota, and I want to give back to our state by ensuring that an equal place, a quality place to live and raise a family, which my wife and I were able to do. After serving in the State House for the past 4 terms, there are one characteristic that I've noticed on all my colleagues, whether Republican or Democrat, is that we all strive to serve our constituents and do what we think is right for our own communities, what our own state, and the state as a whole. Unfortunately, I believe the greatest weakness of the current majority in the legislature is failing to believe in personal responsibility. Too often, the mindset is that the government can solve any problem, regardless of its scope. In these challenging economic times, I think it's unwise for the government to continue raising taxes, and we should keep the money in the hands of the working families to help them make ends meet. Many times during my chats with constituents, I share them how the theme of the campaign came to be. And I'm going to stop there, but I have some great things I can share.
You'll have to go out now and talk to your constituents. Thank you both so much for coming. Valley Access Channels will have replays of this cablecast on Channel 16 and possibly Channel 15 as well as it gets closer to the election. I'm hoping that Valley Access Channels will share it with LATV, Lakes Area Television, whom I'm sure would also play it. So if one of you can follow up and get that out there, that would be great. On behalf of the Stillwater Gazette, Managing Editor Jonathan Young, Forum Organizer Beth Johnson, and myself, I want to thank you both and thank the audience, really great, and thank you for watching.
Thank you. Thank you.